Awesome. Thank you and welcome, Pat.
How you
So
doing?
I've been talking you up while you were gone. So I did already do kind of a little intro, but just a kind of a recap for those who are coming back in. Pat's here. He's going to give us a closing keynote talk on common security gaps and privacy for small and medium-sized businesses. Pat is the founder and CEO of ISP Security, which is a pen testing and cybersecurity consulting firm built specifically for small and medium-sized businesses. I was just saying I am a huge proponent of anyone that's working with small and medium-sized businesses. I feel like they are almost our vulnerable citizens in the business world because they're small. They don't always have the resources they need. They don't always have the money they need. And so I love this. So with that, I will take it away. Everyone, please welcome Patrick. Thank you so much.
Oh, awesome. Thank you, everyone. I don't know. I'm not too familiar with Riverside, so I'm just I don't know where like the questions are and all that stuff. So sweet. Yep. Cool deal. Give me 1 second. I have a quadrillion things up, so I just want to move a few things around. Because I was supposed to do it on a different machine, but my camera wasn't participating on that machine, which is a bummer, but it's all good. Okay. Yeah. No, you're good. I'm just trying to get everything all good. Why is this going over here? This is why. Swap. All right. So I guess I'll just do it there. Perfect. Let me share screen. Share screen. Window. This one. All right. Sweet. Alrighty then. Let me hide this. All right. Cool deal. This is super exciting. Never did like something like this. So, and I think you guys will be the first people to hear this talk, which I'm pretty stoked about. I touched up on some things, but yeah, thank you so much for the intro. Thank you so much for having me. And today we're going to be talking about the security gaps that are killing SMBs. Right? Every day we have small, medium-sized companies that they don't know what they need in cybersecurity or privacy or offensive security from attackers. So this is what, the pain points and what we find as pen testers inside of SMBs. Whoops. Let's go. And a little bit of who I am, or who am I. So my name is Patrick Gorman, also known on the internet as InfoSecPat. I'm a cybersecurity professional, content creator, the founder of ISP Security. I have over 13 years experience of hands-on penetration testing, red teaming, and over 20 years now in IT as a whole. I hold a few certifications under my belt. And when I'm not actually pen testing or teaching, I really enjoy stuff like this, right? Giving back to the community, speaking at conferences, just building an awesome network and improving cybersecurity awareness to everyone and anyone, And I love playing hockey. I work out, and I recently discovered 2 years ago that I'm a good arm wrestler. So I arm wrestle. So the reality of SMBs in cybersecurity and pen testing, right? So like it shows here, like SMBs are now like one of the largest targets for cybersecurity attacks. Yeah, we still have our strikers. We still have our big corporations that people target. But, me personally, like if I was a bad guy, I would go after the SMBs. Why? Because they have to do everything the larger companies do, right? They have credit card data, they have PII, PHI, they have that privacy that they have to still protect, unless you're like some, I don't know. I don't want to put any industries or anything like that on blast, but yeah, I'll keep that comment to myself. But they hold valuable data, right? Just like, for an example, I talked to someone recently. I think I talked about this on the talk on DC 407 last week or this week, whatever. Like I went to a recent meetup and, I talked to a dentist, that has a little firm, has a little practice, and he'd been doing it for 20 years. and he has, 15, 20 employees. And he's like, oh, I'm not a target. And pretty much I ended up testing them, and they had pretty much dentist for their username and password across the whole board for every single machine, even their NAS and their server, which they were, so, and they're like, oh, we don't have anything stored locally. Everything's in the cloud. And I was like, okay, no problem. We can go ahead and test that, and I'll do it for free. Like because I just wanted to show them and prove the point. And I was able to, compromise their data and just do so much stuff. And they didn't really realize, because when they're downloading stuff from their EMR or their dental application, when they're submitting this to an insurance company, they're probably going to have to scan this into something, right? So when you're scanning into, a NAS or a hard drive or anything like that, that data at rest is sitting on your machine, right? Or on a NAS. So that's not in the cloud anymore, at least in this specific situation. So, and they rely heavily on technology, right? They do, but they just don't know how to use it or protect it per se. They often lack mature security programs. Like I said, like I put them into a security program and just said, hey, you need to do X, Y, Z, because, one single click of Sally at the front desk, it can be, a nightmare. And even though maybe you're a $9 million company, what if they hold you up for nine mil, right? So you just have to be really, really careful. And attackers know this. If I know this, I'm sure many people better than me know it. So they take advantage of this all the time. And I see it, on a daily basis. When I'm getting on a call with a potential client or a prospect or anything like that, I always ask them where their pain points are. Have they ever got a pen test, or if they ever got compromised or breached? So why SMBs get targeted, right? So attackers or pen testers or adversaries or whatever you want to call us or them, they prefer easy targets with vulnerable data or valuable data, right? So I think any data is valuable. If you come into my house, my daughter's pictures and everyone else here had an awesome chat, awesome talk, and the privacy of those pictures. If you come into my house and you just go whack, whack, NAS, whack, whatever, and I have no password or nothing to block those null sessions, you can see everything. It's not nothing crazy, but it's pictures of my daughters or my daughter or my family or so on and so forth. So you just have to be really, really careful. So, common SMB assets attackers want. Like when I say attackers, obviously it can mean an attacker as a malicious intent or me as a pen tester pen testing your organization. So I'm going to look for customer data. If I'm doing a web app or mobile app, maybe I want to try to get to personal identifiable information onto an application that houses that data. If I'm going into maybe an internal assessment, maybe I want to try to target credit card data at rest, or some kind of documents with this kind of information, healthcare records. This is a gold mine, and intellectual property, financial systems and information, right? You'll be so surprised. Like people, I have a lot of storytelling, but when there's story time at the end, I actually have a case study on this that I inputted that something happened about 3 months ago, and I just thought it would be cool to share. But we'll get to that later. But yeah, so many SMBs assume, right? Hackers only target big companies. We're not big, we're not big enough to get hacked. But, the bigger organizations per se, like the bigger groups, hacktivists or ransomware groups or whatever. But if you're just some willy-nilly, you're going to go for those low-hanging fruit targets. So, yeah. So that is pretty much a big risk and a gap inside of the world of SMBs. So this is why they get targeted. And I want to tell a little story since we're on this and just popped in my head so I don't lose it. Like I have a friend that took over his dad's business. And his dad's business is a credit card, when you process your credit card, it goes through like a system type thing before it gets to the bank. I can't think about the word right now, but I always told them, hey, so-and-so, you guys have to get pen tested. I'll do it for free. And this was probably like 5 years ago, right? And I was like, hey, just let me come in and test your systems. And I'm like, I know for a fact, because that's my friend. And I'd been to his, when his dad was alive, when his dad died, he took over the business. So before his dad passed, I would like meet him at his business and we'd go for lunch and shoot the shit, So I was like, hey man, like you have a CDE environment, which is, for PCI DSS, you need to have a card holder environment. So I was like, hey, like what is a server name? And I was just curious. And this was 5.5 years ago or something like that. I was like, hey man. And I just went on their Wi-Fi. I didn't even have my laptop. Remember, I wasn't going there to test anything. I was going there to have supper or lunch or whatever I was doing. So I was just like, hey, I want to log into your Wi-Fi because the reception is bad. It was a little way to get onto the Wi-Fi. And I wanted to get into the production Wi-Fi. And then I just like opened up an application. I just did, it's sort of like an Nmap, but it's something different, just to see the subnets on like a ping sweep per se. And when I saw like a DNS name and resolving this IP address, and I was like, oh, this looks juicy, right? And I was like, hey, like who's your IT guy? And I went to the IT guy. I was like, hey man, I just have a question. Is your card holder server called XYZ? And he's like, yeah, how do you know? I'm like, hey man, like you guys aren't segmenting your networks correctly. And he goes, oh, it's not my problem. And I said, hey, you guys have to fix this, man. Literally 2024, they got hacked, ransomed for $33 million. So, and then I told him, then he called me up. He goes, I don't know if I can use profanity here, but I'll try not to. But I'm like, hey, like you guys are effed, right? Like, oh, he said to me, dude, we're effed. And I'm like, I knew you guys were going to get effed at some point, right? So you just have to be really careful. Just be proactive. You're a target no matter how big or how small you are. If an attacker wants to get you, they're going to get you. All right. So what pen testers actually see, during real pen tests, we consistently see the same issues across networks and infrastructures and environments, from cloud to on-prem to hybrid, et cetera, even from privacy to cybersecurity, whatever. So these are not advanced techniques, right? Yeah, we can craft some stuff out. Like when I'm doing a red team engagement, yeah, I'm getting all fancy and doing some crazy stuff with like connecting back to C2s and blah, 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 right? But they are pretty basic security gaps that people try to exploit every day, right? If you understand, if you know what Shodan is, if you have a public facing IP or service or website or whatever, you're getting probed every millisecond, right? You can go on like some of these attack maps and like you can see things like shooting like bananas, right? So, these people are just looking for a target to, have a field trip or a field day with, right? So here's a few examples for you, for anyone that's out there listening. And these are passwords I recently cracked, right? I recently did these. And there was another password that I thought was pretty funny, but I wasn't going to put it on there. And I actually just found that on an internal this week or last week, right? On Tuesday. And I was like, and I don't know, it was bees. Bees are going to hate, but B for the curse word. And I'm like, wow, that was in my word list. Oh, wow. And it was crazy because it was like, damn, that is your password. Cool. That's pretty crazy, but it was cracked, and we were able to get information and get initial access and stuff like that. But other ways that we can exploit is misconfigured AD, right? Active Directory is a massive thing for at least medium-sized companies, right? Depending on how small you are, what you consider small. But when we get into like maybe the 50 plus users, even though I think it's 25. Microsoft recommends if you have 25 hosts on a network, you should start, migrating to AD for centralized management and identity and all that stuff. But, like, yeah, it's not always the case. But unpatched systems is pretty much another gap. Excessive permissions, right? Like we see this all the time. And I'm, another story time. Like I was a sysadmin for many, many years. I was never really a help desk person, but I was a junior admin, a sysadmin, network engineer, cloud engineer, VMware, blah, blah, blah. So when I started doing system administration, if Aetna calls me and says, oh, I need to have access to, the privacy folder. And I'm like, oh, what error are you getting? Oh, permission denied or whatever. Me personally, I would just go in. So I know Aetna, Sam, Bob, Eddie, no one's going to call me anymore. So I would go into the NTFS permissions and the share permissions and add everyone. I'm like, I'm never going to get a call back. I don't want to deal with this anymore. So I would just put everyone group and hit apply. I'm like, okay, just go ahead and log out, log back in. Can you access? Cool, ticket closed, right? But not thinking, I was not thinking security. I just thought I need to close this ticket. And that's the way that I figured out when I did that fix, quote unquote, it made me have that ticket closed. So those things are real, and it still happens till today, and then lack of monitoring, of course. Okay, so gap number one, we have a few gaps here. So weak passwords, we touched on that. Examples found during assessments, right? Like passwords like summer 2025. And people like use these as like examples, but no, these are real. Like in the real world, like I said, password 2026 exclamation was a password I just found Tuesday, right? So, and shared administrator credentials, like if we get into a domain admin, that those credentials that we cracked or found or whatever, if we spray that around, we're like, holy moly, this thing is shared for other service accounts or other user accounts or whatever the case may be. So you just have to, that's why they have stuff like Delinea or some kind of PAM to have your passwords rotated. But for SMB, you're not going to implement something so crazy and so expensive, right? So there's other alternatives, but default vendor passwords, right? Default vendor passwords are massive, especially in SMBs. They go buy a switch or a router or a firewall off of Amazon, and they have, cousin Paul go install it, and they just plug it in, admin or admin password or whatever the case may be, and they just get into it, plug it into your router, have NAT take over. Oh, you got on the internet, boom, and then that's it. And then just leave it, set it and forget it. So, and then when we come in, I found default credentials on an external facing, because if I'm doing it internal and I just do IP chicken or ifconfig-io/ public IP. And if I get that public IP and I go on my phone or something externally, and if I go to that IP : whatever, I can probably get to the firewall, right? Usually they are publicly facing. You should disable that. That's a security risk, but sometimes customers, Uncle Paulie doesn't know how to disable that. They just know how to like read directions on a on a default stock box. No MFA enabled. That's another one. That's a gap that, for privacy, for security, for etc. Excuse me. So attackers can gain access to the system within minutes. I would say seconds, to be honest, depending how tough your machine is. But password spraying, credential stuffing, phishing, all these kind of techniques will leverage the weak password gap, right? And I'm sure maybe someone listening, maybe now or after the recording, guaranteed you probably have something, and you might be in cybersecurity. I remember a friend he was more on the blue team side, security engineer. And I don't know if anyone ever watched that. I think it's Jimmy Fallon or whatever. He went out on like Hollywood Street and like did like a password, like, oh, how are you? In 2025 or whatever, we're trying to find out if your passwords are secure. And like they ended up finding out in like 30 seconds because, they asked, oh, you're never going to guess mine. It's my date of birth and my, year I graduated high school, whatever. Like, oh, okay, cool. What high school did you go to? And then blah, blah, blah. And then you just like fish those information. And I did that with a friend that worked in security, right? Like, and I made it more sophisticated. I made it more like prolonged it. But by the end of the night, I had his password, right? So just be careful. There's connivers out there. But, all right. So gap number 2, no multi-thread or no MFA, right? So there's many SMBs environments rely solely on passwords. And it's really, really a shame because it's such an easy implementation to harden this solution. You have VPN access, especially like when COVID happened, right? Everyone was working remotely and they had to do it really, really quick, right? And that's why there was so many attacks during that time, right? Because now it's like, shoot, now I have to sit at home working. Now these network engineers, whatever, all these engineers have to get this prepped for remote workers, but they're not thinking about security. They're thinking about, production and getting this up and running. Email accounts, right? So, now I tend to see it a lot more, because now Microsoft 365, it's pushing you. I don't even think you can create an account without enabling Authenticator. So, which is really good. But if you're not using that, you're still, if you're using some kind of third party, maybe using GoDaddy, like I know a few people that use GoDaddy for their email and they're just, POP3 and whatever, right? So you just have to make sure all your accounts are secure. Cloud applications, administrator accounts, pretty much without MFA, a stolen password can give you full control. I want to take a sip of my tea real quick, but yeah. These are some fun things to look out for as an attacker or as a pen tester, but this is definitely something that, you as a business owner, as a cybersecurity engineer, or whatever you do to protect your organization, make sure these things are in place because, don't wait for your pen test to happen. Don't wait for you to get breached. You can be proactive with this for sure. All right. So gap numero 3. So misconfigured AD. These are my favorite, right? I love internal assessments. That's probably my favorite, and that's probably where I'm the best at out of all the service lines that I provide. Wi-Fi I'm pretty good at too. But so Active Directory is often the core of any SMB, more like MB, right? Medium-sized businesses. Like I said, small businesses. And I would love to hear, like, if you work for a small business, do you use AD? Not intra ID, not in a cloud, like an Active Directory on-prem that you're, that if you work on site, right? If you work on site and you're less than 50 users, do you use AD? Please put that in the chat. I'm curious, because I would love to know. And so it's really, really probably 99% of the time misconfigured. I just set up a lab last night. I was up super late setting this AD lab for, I was trying to mock an environment that I just did that assessment with that bees be hated or whatever the hell that password was. And I was like, okay, like I found ADC, like I found so many different, so many bad configs. And then I was trying to like put a Windows Server 2025 together and just make all those misconfigurations and put it, I might submit it to like maybe one of the platforms to actually be a CTF, but we'll see what happens there. But it was a really, really cool thing that I was able to gather or gain access to with a non-intent way, like not running your responder, getting a hash, blah, blah, blah. Like I did it another way. I'm not going to disclose that how I did it right now, but it was really, really cool. And I'm trying to mock that setup and as best as I can, right? And try to put that together for maybe a CTF or maybe an event or something. We'll see. But common issues, like I said, those privileges will bite you in the butt. I'm telling you, co-browsing vulnerabilities, right? If you have a service account, it's co-browsable probably. service accounts with password issues. And I've seen, not with that engagement, it's probably been a couple months, no, maybe a year, but I used to see it all the time. Like I think now, like there's more awareness on like, don't put your password in the description of your AD, but you'll see it's something. I haven't seen it. Me personally, I haven't seen like almost a year, but I would see it all the time. Before that, like it was always coming up. Like if I'm doing an internal assessment, there's a service account with a password in the description. And I'm like, guys, this is like an easy win. Like, come on, don't do it. Don't do me like that. But delegation, misconfigurations is definitely another one that, we could take advantage of. And like I said, as system admins, you're not thinking about all this stuff. You're just trying to get it to work and do your thing. But the one thing that if you get a pen test and they're giving you all of the findings and how they exploited your AD, please, like I'm begging you, like fix those, because we're just doing the work to make sure your privacy and your security is in place. Like remediate those findings, because if you get another engagement, they're just going to light you up. And if someone finds out that those vulnerabilities are sitting in your environment, and if you have a disgruntled employee that just Googled how to do a co-browsing attack and found one of, say, my videos, and they're like doing these tools, because it's not very hard to like install Kali Linux and just run these tools, right? It doesn't take a rocket science to like copy and paste a command. So you just have to be really careful and just remediate. You have that report, remediate those findings. And a result, excuse me, can be the following, right? Attackers can escalate their permissions and privileges and reach DA. Like I said, on that one that I'm not going to disclose, I got DA in I think 4 hours, or 3 hours, or something like that. It was pretty quick. But yeah. So yeah, gap number 4, unpatched systems. We see a lot of SMBs struggle with patch management, right? Because you're worried and you're still not worried. That's not the word. You're still depending on like your Windows updates, your patch Tuesday, blah, blah, blah. But if you're a small business and you cannot afford an IT person, use an MSP, but obviously be careful who you use, because even with that space, I've seen some not so good MSPs out there, but a lot of the RMM tools do the patching for you, right? So you shouldn't have any outdated servers if you're using some kind of service or some kind of like MSP or something like that. And if you do have to do something called risk acceptance of like, okay, we have this for imaging X-rays and it has to be on Windows XP or Windows 7 or whatever, because, it was developed in 1985, make sure that doesn't access the internet, right? Just put it on a segmented network, or just have the dental techs or whoever looks at dental X-rays, just go directly to there and maybe just have its own isolated network, if you have to have that risk, but don't have it on your production, please. Because, you'll be a hacker's, Christmas present. And vulnerable web apps, right? And I'm not talking about like externally facing web apps. I'm talking about like internally, right? Like a lot of people think, oh, I just have, something, I don't need to update it because whatever. But if Joe Schmo puts something in a web app that's sitting in-house and, one of the engineers is like, oh, I want to check something out. I want to try something out. And they accidentally put a NAT rule that allows traffic from 443 or port 80 from that web server. Now it's going out to the internet, and an attacker starts probing because, bug bounties, hackers, they have their automation that's just probing daily. If they find something juicy, it's going to be Merry Christmas or whatever, Happy Hanukkah, whatever you celebrate. I don't know. But old network firmware on routers, switches, and firewalls, that's another thing. Like make sure you update your firmware. I should have put access points as well. But end of life operating systems like Windows Server 2003, XP, 7, and others, right? Windows XP, I still see it. And I still see it. The last time I seen it was like 4 months ago. No, I'm lying. And before Thanksgiving. So like 6 months ago. Can't believe what are we in? March. Yeah. So about 6 months ago. And it was at a credit union. And they're like, oh, this is, we're using Windows XP embedded for our ATM systems. And I'm like, holy moly, right? Thank God I don't bank with you, right? So it's just like, and they're like, oh yeah, we got pen tests before, and they always tell us that we have to I'm like, go hire someone that's a better coder. Go throw your code in some AI thing and have it probably develop something better than something that's sitting on your Windows XP, because that gets hacked. That's going to be no bueno. So, unpatched systems, is definitely a gap that you want to make sure you secure. And that's like in that situation, that's a privacy issue too, right? Like if I'm banking with you, how's my privacy, good when there's outdated systems? Like, I don't know, because I'm not an IT guy, right? I'm just getting my money out of the ATM. But, you just have to be aware of that stuff and be considerate of your clients or your folks. Whoops. All right, next one here. So hackers pretty much exploit, known vulnerabilities quickly when it's an unpatched system. So another one here. I'll take another drink because we still have some time. And I have a lot of stories, so we have some cool things to discuss. So, poor asset visibility, right? And this is another thing for small, medium-sized companies. They don't have like the asset management like maybe a hospital does, or a massive bank, or a massive insurance firm, or whatever industry you reside in. You cannot secure what doesn't exist, what you don't know exists, right? Like, I know for a fact, me personally, when I was getting into the world of pen testing and hacking, I was transitioning from like network security engineering to penetration testing and like doing some stuff. This was when Backtrack R3 was out. So it was a long time ago. And I remember we used to push out, like in VMware, they have something called a Horizon View. And then you could push out like little thin clients or little zero clients and have it connect back to your VMware orchestrator, I think it was. And then you get presented with your view or your VDI, your virtual desktop infrastructure. So I remember like I took one of those little nooks or whatever you want to call them. I put Backtrack R3, which was a pain in the butt back then because drivers were like a nightmare. But I ended up getting the driver for the NIC. I popped it in, had SSH to that box, and I had persistence on that network. And I remember like when I left and I went to another company, I shouldn't have done this, right? This was illegal. I don't condone this. But I was just like, one day I was just like curious. I'm like, man, I wonder if that damn NIC is still online, right? But obviously I wasn't at my house. So even if they traced the traffic how it entered, it wasn't anywhere. I was smart enough there. But I was like, I wonder if that thing is still up. And damn behold, it was damn up. Like it was there, and it was like 2.5 years later, right? Because I just put this thing in not in the server room. Like I hid it, right? So the only reason that never found it is because they couldn't physically see it, right? But if they had something that was probe and knows, like, okay, we have some rogue device on the network, I don't know what this thing is, even if they couldn't find it, they can kill it remotely. They can see where it's on the switch or whatever. The network guys, you can do show cam tables and see the MAC address and all that stuff. But anyhow, it was a little interesting that I was able to access it 2 years later. So shadow IT systems is real. Right? Like I said, I got a lot of stories. So make sure like what you have. If you're maybe if you're a pen tester or if you're a cybersecurity person that works in-house, like make sure you tell those, asset management folks, like whatever, IT, whoever takes care of that, like make sure there's never anything lingering around. And if something is like not accessed or not logged in, a lot of like, I guess in that sense, like there was no EDR, there was nothing to really say, okay, that hasn't been logged in. So, but you guys get the point. Unknown cloud services is another one that are common findings for like poor asset management. Forgotten servers. This I think happens a lot more now than before because like, when you had physical servers in a rack, you can see what you have, especially like when back then, like you're always in your office, right? And me personally, when I was a sysadmin and network engineer, like I would go to the MDF and the IDFs just to get out of my office. I'm like, I'm gonna go take a walk. I'm gonna check and I'll look at the servers and make sure all the lights are on or whatever. It was just to get up out of my chair. But then when they started hypervising, virtualizing everything into hypervisors like Hyper-V, VMware, whatever Citrix back then, Zen, what is it? Zen Server, Zen App, Zen Desktop, whatever, back then. Now it was harder because now you have one server and then you have like, 5 to 10 servers within. So if you're not making sure your, all your VMs are up to date, or if you have a legacy VM that's just sitting out there that you don't know about, that can be an entry point. So, and also rogue devices on your network. And then, attackers love forgotten assets laying around. I'm telling you, it's a thing. And even like when I'm doing physical or some kind of internal assessment, now like if I'm doing if you hire me for doing internal assessment, I just send out a little Nook. I use Zero Tier. I don't know if anyone here ever heard of Zero Tier. That's how I connect to. I have my own little network that I connect to my Nook, and then I can actually do my pen test. But if I left it there, the client will probably never realize because it's so tiny, right? Like all it needs is power and Ethernet, and I can like hide it in a damn ceiling. You know what I mean? And it's just really, really scary. Just making sure your asset management is on point. And I know I'm talking a lot about that, but you'll be surprised. All right, let's see what else is cooking. So what attackers actually do. So as an attacker, as a pen tester, as an adversary, APT, etc., I think we all follow the same path. So it's pretty predictable, right? It's reconnaissance. We don't know who we're going to attack if we don't have any information on them or those targets. Then we get initial access, right? Once we have initial access, we'll try to see if we can privilege escalate our permissions. And then if we can priv-es, we can see if we can move around your network. We can laterally move. And then obviously data exfiltration or ransomware. This is in the order, but obviously if I wanted to send you some kind of malware and you download something and you connect back to my C2, that's not really, I don't need do any of the other things because I just have to send you an email and you give me, you bypass 1 to 4 because I want to try to get it to, or 1 to 3, excuse me. And then, I want to try to bypass those permissions and try to get to someone that's juicy, that has the permissions that I need or that I want. Right? So security gaps allow attackers to move through, through their steps quickly. Right? It's super, super, super easy. It's not very hard at all. And I like this AI generated pic that I got here. It's pretty cool. Actually, it's funny because when I saw that, like I had that same setup when I was doing my VCP and my VCAP, which is VMware Certified Professional. Like I had those Dell servers just like that. And it was like, holy moly, it looks just like me. I literally was like set up. I just didn't have like a 1985 white keyboard and mouse, but literally like this kind of setup right here was actually how I actually looked like 10 years ago, or maybe longer, 15. So the good news, right? Because where there's bad, there's always some good, right? So the good news is most SMB breaches are preventable. I really, really think that. Let me get a sip of this thing. So organizations can dramatically reduce risk with the following, right? Make sure you have MFA everywhere. it's not only like this is for businesses, but even for your personal accounts, right? Your bank accounts, your Instagram, Facebook, Gmail, Proton Mail, whatever you use, right? Your phone, and MFA everywhere. I know it can be a pain in the butt. Like sometimes I hate it because I'm like, if I'm charging my phone, if I'm doing something, I'm like, oh crap, where's my phone? You know what I mean? It can be a pain in the butt, but you know, without that pain in the butt, now if someone had my password because it got compromised in a breach, then you know that pain in the butt would just go into my account and do whatever they need to do. Strong password policies. Like, I think this is really, really cool. I should have just put like strong word policies because I don't even use passwords anymore. I use like passphrases. I've been doing that for probably 6 years now. And there's some passwords I don't even know. Like I just use my Vault for Proton to actually just generate a password for me. And network segmentation. So like, and you know, you have like your IoT devices, you have your production, you have your printers, you have your guest network. Make sure everything's on a separate VLAN. And obviously, you know, you can install NAC. You can install a whole bunch of stuff to really, really prevent your stuff, depending on how good your network security guys are. Regular patching, updating your systems definitely is something that you should definitely be doing. Even personally, right? Always take a backup. Even like my phone, right? Like if I'm like, oh, the newest iPhone release, I don't just hit update. I don't do that. Like I back up my phone. I wait for like 2 or 3 days. And then I update it, maybe a day and a half, 2 days. Maybe I'm lying for 3 days. I wouldn't go 3 days really, but like maybe a day or two. Make sure like if anyone else reports, oh, this new iOS crashed my phone, I'm like, oh, I ain't jumping on that bandwagon. So, and then security monitoring. You know, depending on how big your organization is, you know, have some kind of monitoring. You know, it's not very difficult. There's so many good tools out there. There's even open source tools. And then, you know, do penetration testing. You know what I mean? Like I put a smiley face for obvious reasons because I do pen testing. So, you know, do penetration testing, make sure your security gaps are closed. And it's really, really important. It's really, really important, especially if you're like, you know, I did a talk on, you know, who actually needs penetration testing, right? There's industries that are required to get pen tested. So why penetration testing matters? Because pen testing simulates real world attacks, right? So it helps organizations, it helps like companies and people as well. Like when I say people, like myself, like I pen test myself probably like once every other month. I don't do it all the time. Like once every other month, I'll see what's out there on me, you know, and being some figure in the community, like, you know, there's fake accounts like sock puppet accounts and fake accounts that they act as me and they want to, you know, try to recover your Facebook. I'm like, that's not me. You know what I mean? You have to contact Meta. I'm not going to help you, you know, and people stealing people's money because of, you know, identity theft or taking a picture and just saying, you know, I have so many, if you put InfoSecPad on the internet, you know, there's probably a quadrillion different, you know, accounts that aren't me. You know what I mean? I think it's funny actually, but it's, you just have to protect yourself, right? Like I used to like get upset. I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like now if someone hacks, they're going to come after me, but you know, there's a paper trail and everything. Right. So at the end of the day, like if I'm sitting in my house and my IP is this, yeah, you can mask it and all that stuff, but you know, you can seize all my equipment. It's not me, you know? So I'm not even worried about it. So pen testing helps identify hidden vulnerabilities, things that you don't even know about, going back to the rogue access points or rogue devices on your network, just hidden things that you may not know. Like maybe you don't know that you have a null session that's open up to everyone for the HR, you know, and everyone can see how much everyone's getting paid because, you know, it's sitting on a share somewhere. You know, you never know. Test your defenses, your EDR, your IPS, your IDS, your firewalls, your, you know, whatever, you know, all your controls, your whatever, Okta, whatever you guys have, right? Make sure you test it. And then validate the security controls. improve security posture. All of this stuff is super, super good because it helps you get to that next level of closing that gap. I don't think that gap will ever completely be closed just because the world that we live in. But if you try to break or close that gap as best as you can, you'll be better off, right? You'll make someone like myself or someone's life harder. You're not going to make it easier. So, and that's always good, right? Like I like to see satisfactory on reports, right? Like when there's because at the end of the day, we can't just hack everything when we're doing an engagement, right? We have an in scope, we have rules of engagement, what's in scope, what's out of scope, etc. So whatever's in scope, and if there's like, man, I'm at hour 35 and I'm like, shit, I have 5 more hours left on this engagement. The SIM hit me up, or the SIM, they'll lock the account out, blah, 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 because they have all their controls in place. I'm like, kudos. You know what I mean? Like, I love to see that. It's not all about, because at the end of the day, we have to make sure the client or the user or whoever is happy with the result that you get. If you're like lighting them up and making them look silly, even though it's a relationship that you try to harden their situation, like it's always good to have like thumbs up sometimes, right? And you'll be surprised. Like there's some companies that like I've tried everything, especially on non-assumed breach scenarios, like when I don't have username and password, because a lot of the companies are having, stronger password policies because they went through these trenches already and they got yelled at, right? So when I come around to do their engagement, I'm like, okay, they're like 3 tests in for the last 3 years. And now I'm coming. So they already remediated all the low hanging fruits. Now it's like, man, now I have to work harder. But, then you have a startup which is I'm the first one in. So I'm lighting them up, right? So, there's a give and take. So final takeaways. So there's some things that I want to talk about here, right? Cybersecurity is not just an enterprise problem, right? It's a you problem. In my opinion, my dad, my aunt, my uncle, my family, everyone at the end of the day is at risk for cybersecurity incidents. Small, medium-sized businesses face, real threats every day, every single day, every single second. I just gotta, I want to tell you a little story. I know about what time is it for. So, and I said this on a call the other day, and I made the guy crack up. So I got a text because scammers are going to be scammers. So I got a text on Wednesday saying, "Hey, like, did you buy something for $450 from Best Buy? If you didn't, press no. If you did, press yes." And I knew it was like a scam because obviously I don't go to Best Buy, and I was like, no, right? I just text no, and then it said delivered. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. This is going to be fun. And then they're like, oh, this is from my bank, from a Chase fraud department or whatever. And I'm like, hey man, just give me a call. So I'm ready to troll. I had like an hour to kill, so I'm like fucking bored as hell. So I'm like, okay, this is going to be fun. So I'm like, hey, and he's like, yeah, is your credit card this? And I'm like, no, but you're close, because I think, with these scammers, and these weren't overseas scammers. These were people here in the States, because you can tell by the accent. So I think they just knew where I'm from, because they said, oh, in the Orlando area, because I'm in the Orlando area. And I'm like, nope. That's not me. And then they set an address. So now, excuse me. So now, like with my identity, since I have a little presence on the internet, I try to be as private as possible. So even with like my LLC, yeah, you can go to sunbiz.org and look at LLCs and all that stuff. But I did have a private LLC, because there's like trust, and you can put your trust into an LLC. And, if you're a business person, you'll understand that. Or even if you're not, like if you're on the internet, you should try to protect your identity as much as you can. Not to get too crazy, but in the state of Florida, if you're going to come through, I think everyone has firearms. So good luck. But I think on the other hand, like protecting your assets and protecting your information is super, super key. So this guy was just going on and on about, and he goes, "Oh, I want to help you." And I was like, "Hey man, I had to cut him. I was like on the phone with him for like 35 minutes at this point, and I had a meeting in 20 minutes. So I was like, "Hey, I'm not going to report you. I'm not a rat. That's something like, where I'm from, we don't do that stuff. So I'm like, I'm not going to rat you out, man. I'm not going to go. I have all your information. You text me from your real phone number, which you effed up there. I know where you live. I have all the information. While you're doing your quote unquote research, I'm researching you as well. And this is all I have." And I'm like, "I'm not going to report you. Just stop this shit. You know what I mean? Make this one be the last one. Your last call or whatever." I don't know if it's, if that was enough to help the situation, but I don't know. Me personally, I'm not going to go to the cops. I'm not that kind of person. But yeah, so that was a little crazy thing. And it's like, try to scam me. And I'm like, and there's other people are falling for these scams. And that's why there's people like Pierogi and those like overseas scammers and like Bitcoin and all that stuff. This guy wasn't trying to get money. He was just trying to get my information, like my credit card. He's like, "Oh, verify your card number. I want to make sure it matches my system." I'm like, "Dude, I might have been in special ed, but I'm not that retarded." Right. So yeah. So like small, medium-sized business face these kind of things every single day. And closing the security gaps can make a difference between a secure organization or a devastating breach, right? So here's a case study that I wanted to discuss really quickly. So case study, accounting firm ransomware attack. This is real. Let me get a sip. And yeah. So this was in August. Yeah, when is DEF CON? August, right? It was just before DEF CON last year. Because I was like super stoked. I was like, getting we did this pen test like 8 months before this, like maybe in November of 2024 or something like that. And then just before, like I remember very, very clearly because I was just talking to my friend Paul. I'm like, "Yo, man, I can't wait." And all my friends that I was meeting up with in DEF CON, and I get a call that from the founder, because I know them. They're a client of mine. Like, "Hey, man, you never guess what happened." I'm like, "Yeah, what's up, dude? Like, I'm actually flying out tomorrow to Vegas for DEF CON or whatever." It was like Black Hat, all the good stuff. And he's like, "Dude, all my systems are encrypted with ransomware." I'm like, "No way." And he's like 2 hours away from me, right? Like he's not near me, like he's about 2 hours away. And he's like, "Yeah, man, like I don't know what to do." So he's a friend of mine. So I did help him like with backups. Like like when he was small, like I was helping him out with his IT stuff. So we had like backups. We use, different solutions to back his data up. So I said, "Hey, like it's going to be tough for me to make it there. And obviously I'm not remoting into your machine." So I walked him through restoring his data, right? Restoring the data from like the day before. And it was a nightmare because he's not very tech savvy. And then I'm like, okay, if we didn't have this backup, because the backup that they found, the attackers encrypted the backup, right? So, you paid a ransom. If he paid the ransom, they would have lost, productivity, clients, whatever, right? So when that whole thing happened, I was like, "Hey, what you need to do is probably have your folks, like your workers, work from home," because everything is in the cloud, or 90% of it was in the cloud. I was like, have them work from home. Don't have them turn on the computers. Just actually, if you can, until I get back, turn the internet off at the office. Is like turn everything off so they have no access. So he almost paid for the ransom. he's like, Pat, I can't like wait for you to get back. I need to be in business, blah, blah, blah. And I explained to him like, dude, you really don't have to be in your office to do your business. So I made him, think of outside a little bit of the box. And then he could have lost productivity. Like I said, clients, repetition, etc. So I was like, hey, what we have to do is implement some stuff and stop being a cheapskate, right? Because see, he was very cheap. I'm not going to lie. So I'm like, hey, like we have to implement MFA. We have to start segmenting your stuff, like whatever's important to your, then I finally went on site. We tested all the backups, and ever since there hasn't been any issues, right? So this was a real attack, and it was crazy because he didn't think, he was one of the other ones that always say, I don't have to worry about that. And it's a real thing. All right. So we have a few more minutes. Obviously 5 quick wins, apply this week. Obviously enable MFA everywhere, patch monthly, test your backups, train your employees, and create an incident response plan. And that's about it, folks. So thank you. And always remember, cybersecurity is a progress, not a perfection, and small talk and consistent steps. And yeah, if you want to connect with me today, if you have any questions about pen testing or privacy or whatever, you can contact me on LinkedIn. My Instagram is that, and my website is www.ispsecurity.co, and you can email info@ispsecurity.co. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Pat. That was a lot of really good information and I love all of your stories. I have a bunch of similar ones myself. So I love hearing the little, one-offs that we find, like Windows XP still being actively used in the wild. Those always kill me. You gave us like an attacker's view from the inside, which I think is like the most honest version of the conversation that we can have. And then some really practical things to follow up with. So, for those watching, just a reminder, you'll be able to get the slides at the end because there was a lot of really good things that I plan to definitely tuck away, for using with our own small businesses.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you, what do you feel like might be like the gap that surprises most small businesses when you show it to them?
Yeah, so I think backups I think are so critical because people, they think because their stuff is in the cloud, they don't need to back up their data. And it's just so critical because you don't realize how much stuff that you have on your documents. And then like, God forbid, your PC crashes and it's like, oh, I needed that document that was sitting on my computer. I'm like, oh, but I thought everything is backed up, right? So that's where I think a big gap is. And obviously it's not like so much cyber, it's probably like more like business continuity. But that's one. And I guess like passwords, I think is another one. Because I think like they think their passwords are like invisible, especially like small, medium-sized, smaller companies. Like no one can get my password. My password is, I've hijacked, with Beef, using Beef or browser exploitation framework, like compromising sessions tokens and dumping passwords in your browser history and blah, 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 doing all that cool stuff. And it's like, wow, because never save your password to Google, Chrome or Edge or Firefox or whatever. Like never do that. Have like a vault. But yeah, that's I think the biggest ones that I see a lot,
I think too, I wanted to kind of highlight what you said about passwords earlier. The password 2026, spring, summer, fall 2026, people still think that that's like an acceptable way to do that. And I worked for a large defense contractor where we took all of those super popular passwords every quarter, not every quarter, we did it like every week, and would run it against all the passwords because we didn't know what people's passwords were. We hashed those passwords and then ran it against the hash tables. And you would find in all these people, we'd send them emails. Hey, your password is spring 2020. 8, you need to change that. That's not okay. And like they'd be like, oh my gosh, what witchery is this? And it's not, right? Like it's actually very, very basic. And I think that like people still think like, oh well, it's 10 characters, I used an exclamation point and there's some numbers in there, I'm good, it's fine. So I'm really glad that you kind of brought that up. It's funny to us, I think, that it continues to be something. This has been forever since passwords have been a thing. People have been trying to shorten them, and I think that's why people don't understand just how easy, like password managers and using those, like generated passwords and stuff can actually really be easy and not as difficult, I think, as people sometimes think they are. But
yeah, no, 1,000%. And it's like, we don't even have to guess it, right? We just use tools to do it. And it's like, that's the crazy thing. It's not like, and just like I said, that story, like my friend, just chatting with him throughout the night, and I was able to get his password at the end of the night, right? And just by like being nice and just I knew him really well, but it's like, oh, just trying to, get to know him a little more and try to get like little nuances, like little information details. And I just put things together, and he's like, yeah, that's my password, dude. I'm like,
and bad actors do that too. They spend the time to get to know people
absolutely.
and build those relationships. And like people need to remember that too. Like Edna had mentioned in their talk about like online, the romance stuff. And it's the same thing. People are going to take the time to get to know people. You're not the only one. You're not, like, people want to say, oh, I'm not the target, I'm too small. There's 1,000 targets for this one person that they're working on right now. This is a business for them. A lot of these places they're going to work at a high rise, and they're working for people paying them to do all of this stuff and to get money any way they can. And so like, you may think that you're just one, but you're not. And
it's an operation.
It is. It's a huge operation.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Pat. I
Absolutely.
really enjoyed everything that you had to speak, and thank you so much for joining us and being our closing keynote. I think that this was a great way to end our first conference.
Cheers. Likewise. And I really appreciate being a part of it, and hopefully so much more success.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.